Good evening, this is Larry D. Cordario, your first reporter for today's lesson. Before we proceed to the meat of the topic, let us do some recap. The first discussants have introduced us to learner-centered teaching, its approaches, theories, and outcomes of teacher education. The next group discusses human memories, motivations, emotions, and emotional intelligence. At this juncture, the last discussants will talk about essential aspects that we need to consider as future teachers. These are the learning styles, learners from different backgrounds, fair and safe learning environment, learner participation, and misbehavior management. In our EDUC 102 course, we have been introduced to instructional designs such as the SURE model. For weeks 7 to 9, we are expected to create an instructional plan that reflects learner-centered teaching principles and approaches in an exclusive learning environment. So, I will begin with learning styles. All of us have different types of learning according to what kind of style is efficient and effective to us. It proposes that every student learns differently. This proves that the learning style of student A might not work with student B. Thus, we should ask ourselves, how do we learn? Do you learn best with pictures, music, dictionary, or would you like to use your body physically? Additionally, there are factors that are connected with learning, namely cognitive, emotion, environment, and prior experience. All of these will be elaborated by my co-discussants. I'm now giving the spotlight to the next reporter.
Hello everyone, my name is Madeline Lamburan and I will continue to discuss to you the 7 learning style according to Ferreman 2013. The number 5 is logical mathematical, which is for logic, reasoning, and system to understand the concept. So nag-refers ni siya sa child's ability to reason, solve problem, and learn using numbers, abstract, visual information, and analysis of cause and effect relationship. For example, a person who loves to play chess, they would love to think rationally and detect innovative ways to win the game. Number 6 is solitary, refers to work alone and use self-study and analysis to aid in their learning. So, solitary is characteristic of those who prefer working alone or self-motivated individuals. Mga common na characteristics sa solitary are enjoy spending time alone, excellent self-management skill, has a strong sense of self, and highly independent. And the number 7 and the last one is social interpersonal, to learn in group and as much as possible with other people. So if you have a strong social style, you communicate well with the people both verbally and non-verbally. People listen to you or come to you for advice and you are sensitive to their motivations, feelings, or moods. You listen well and understand others' views. You may enjoy mentoring or counseling others. Some example of pursuit that people with a strong social style may follow include counseling, teaching, training, and coaching. We are more likely to use phrases like, for example, let's work together on this. We can work it out and tell me what you are thinking. Social interpersonal is opposite sa solitary. Kung ang solitary prefer working alone and naga-enjoy siya spending time alone, social interpersonal naman mas prefer niya na may kasama. Let's move forward to Kolb's 4 basic learning styles based on his 4 stages of learning cycle. The first one is concrete experience, putting learned material into practice. So in a concrete experience, each learner engage in an activity or task. Kolb believed that the key to learning is involvement. It is not enough for learners just to read about it or watch it in action. In order to acquire new knowledge, learners must actively engage in the task. So Kolb believed that learners must actively engage in the task because it's not enough for learners just to read. They must engage in the task or activity. Number 2 is reflective observation. Analysis objectively an outcome. This stage in the learning cycle allows the learner to ask questions and discuss the experience with others. Communication at this stage is vital as it allows the learner to identify any discrepancies between their understanding and the experience itself. So, sa kaning stage, communication is very important as ginaalaw sila nga mangutana og question o i-share sa lain ang ilang mga experiences. Number 3 is abstract conceptualization and generalization, reviewing conceptual and understanding. The learner attempts to draw conclusion of the experience by reflecting on their prior knowledge using ideas with which they are familiar or discussing possible theories with peers. The last one is active experimentation, experimenting to find solution to a problem. So in this stage, learners return to participating in a task, this time with the goal of applying their conclusions to new experiences. They are able to make predictions, analyze tasks, and make plans for the acquired knowledge in the future. So, we're done in Kolb's basic learning styles. So, let's move on Kolb's concept of the following learning styles. The learning styles described by Kolb are based on two major dimensions, active reflective and abstract concrete. The number 1 is converger. The person relies mainly on abstract conceptualization and active experimentation. So, people with this learning style have dominant abilities in the areas of abstract conceptualization and active experimentation. They are highly skilled in the practical application of ideas. They tend to do best in situations where there is a single best solution or answer to a problem. Number 2 is diverger. The person is best at reflective and concrete experience. Divergers' dominant abilities lie in the areas of concrete experience and reflective observation, essentially the opposite strength of the convergers. People with this learning style are good at seeing the big picture and organizing smaller bits of information into a meaningful whole. Number 3 is assimilator. The person predominantly uses abstract conceptualization and reflection. Assimilators are skilled in the areas of abstract conceptualization and reflective observation. Understanding and creating theoretical models is one of their greatest strengths. They tend to be more interested in abstract ideas than in people, but they are not greatly concerned with the practical applications of theories. And the last one but not the least is accommodator. The person uses concrete experience and active experimentation. People with this learning style are strongest in concrete experience and active experimentation. This style is basically the opposite of the assimilator style. Accommodators are doers. They enjoy performing experiments and carrying out plans in the real world. That's all. Thank you for listening. And now for the next reporter.
Good evening, everyone. So tonight, we will be going to talk about the 5 models of learning styles. A brief definition of learning styles would be preferred method of learning. And so before investigating each models of learning styles, let's answer the question, why are student learning styles are important? As teachers, it's important to know your students, especially their strengths. Teachers should know what is the best way to get an individual student to process and absorb the information. Teachers can then use that information to help their students succeed academically. So the first model of learning style that we will be going to talk about is the VART model of learning style by Neil Fleming. So there are 4 models of learning styles, which are visual, auditory, reading or writing, and kinesthetic. Visual, for the use of maps, images, and graphic organizers to access and understand new information. The visual learning style can also be referred to as a graphic learning style. Visual doesn't necessarily mean pictures or videos unless they are visual cues or connections to the material and how to apply that. Some tools or methods that a visual learner may benefit from using or doing are visual plans or diagrams, visuals that allows the learners to see patterns. Auditory, for listening and speaking situations such as lectures, discussions to understand new information. Auditory learners process information through hearing things and talking about them. Lectures rely heavily on an auditory material delivery, but auditory learners can also use discussions, talking out loud about material to themselves or with others, and radio or podcasts, recording notes and listening back to them and or creating stories about the material. Reading, writing, for reading and writing to learn new information. Those students who prefer their reading or writing style might do really with their textbooks, handouts, written notes, post-it notes, and reading lists, and this is the way that they are able to recall and retain information through reading and writing. They are able to see more connections through categorization and creating hierarchies and using analysis, especially written ones, and so there are the students who might need to read it and write and then read it again and write it again or review what they've already written. But this style relies pretty heavily on some of that repetition to be able to recall and retain that information. Kinesthetic. For tactile representation of information, students learn through hands-on activities or figuring out. So kinesthetic refers to as hands-on learning, but it is heavily reliant on application and practice, which can be also theoretical in nature. Methods or tools for the kinesthetic learner can include using as many senses as possible, using simulation or lab practice, and situational role plays. 7 Learning Styles by Freeman 2013. So there are 7 learning styles, which are visual, oral, verbal, physical, logical, solitary, and social. So visual is for using pictures, images, diagrams, colors, mind maps to understand material, to organize information, and with others. So visual learning style is one of the most popular learning style. The visual learners prefer through flowcharts, diagrams, mind maps, and many infographics. Oral, for using sound, rhythm, music, recording, clever rhymes to learn new information. So it is also called as auditory or even musical learning style. Anyone who loves music understands that music at its best creates an emotional connection. The connection of emotional connection to sound and music leads to better comprehension. Verbal or linguistics, for using words both in speech and in writing to assist in their learning. So it is also known as the linguistic learning style. So verbal learners make most out of both the written and verbal word. Look to facilitate discussions, classroom debates, and more sharing of ideas. So these students are natural-born speakers and will excel when given a chance to verbally express themselves. Therefore, give these students the opportunity to present in front of their peers. Physical or kinesthetic, for using hands, body, and sense of touch to learn about the world. As a teacher, try give students the opportunity to walk around and stretch and provide class activities. Some courses are better designed to allow teachers to provide kinesthetic activities in the classroom. When it comes to instruction, incorporate hands-on learning activities, use manipulatives, and different projects. To know more about the 7 learning styles, it will be discussed by Ms. Madeline Lamburan.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mary Camille Malubay, and I will be discussing to you about the Honey and Mumford learning styles. The Honey and Mumford learning styles were published by Peter Honey and Alan Mumford in 1986. Honey and Mumford learning styles model identifies the 4 different styles that people use to learn something new. First, the activist, the theorist, pragmatist, and the reflector. So, let's examine each of the Honey and Mumford learning styles. So, first is the activist. Activists, they are the people who learn best by doing. They are also like to get their hands dirty and they are enthusiastic about being thrown in at the deep end and trying a new things. They love to tackle problems using brainstorming session with others to figure things out, and they are more than happy to lead this session themselves. When their enthusiasm for an experience begins to wane, they are immediately start to look for the next challenge. So the best learn in activist is when they thrown in at the deep end, and when working with others and trying new experiences. And when it comes to activities, the suited to the activist will be the brainstorming, the group discussion, the role play, and hands-on problem solving. So let's move on to the theories. These are the people who learn best by understanding the theory behind why something is the way it is. So they need models. They need models, concepts, and facts to be able to learn effectively. So they are also enjoying to analyzing and assimilating information to form their own theories. So they value the logic and rational thinking. So they are also learning the learning in theories, the learning must have a logical purpose in order for them to engage with it, and they like to be able to ask questions so that they can form their own opinions. So the best learn in theories is when they are when there is a theory or a logical model behind everything that they learn, and they have the opportunity to ask questions. They can see the purpose behind everything they learn. And when it comes to activity, the suited to theories is the models, the facts and figures, the codes, and kanang mga storytelling. So the third one will be the pragmatist. So pragmatist is it is a learn best when the best learn when they can see how what they are learning can be put into practice in the real world. So they are also like to take a new idea. They have to learn and immediately try to put into a practice. So they are also they want to seek out new ways to use that to use what they have learned in practices in practice. So the best learn in pragmatist is when they can see the connection between what they are learning and it is used in practice, and they can get feedback on how they are doing from an expert. So they are also a practical example. They can copy or develop. So when it when it comes to activities naman, suited to pragmatist is the case studies, the problem solving, discussing on how to translate theory into practice. So the last one is the reflector. Reflector, we are the people who learn when they can observe others and think about what they have just observed. So these are the people who avoid jumping straight in and prefer to watch first before they do. And they like to collect data from many sources and perspective. And also, they are cautious and like to consider all the angles before committing to an action. So, the best learn in reflectors is when given time to think before they have to take an action. So, also to investigate first before they have to take an action. So, when it comes to activities naman, the suited to reflectors will be the when observing other perform activities and receiving feedback from others. So those are the different learning styles of Mumford. So now, as you can see from the diagram, the Honey and Mumford learning style are plotted around two axes, the horizontal axis and the vertical axis. So, and horizontal axis is called the processing continuum and refers to how we approach a task, that is, do we prefer to learn by watching or doing, while in vertical axis is called the perception continuum, and it refers to our emotional responses to the task or how we think and feel about it. So, Honey and Mumford learning style suggests that most people prefer to use just one or two of these distinct styles. So I think that's all, and thank you for listening.
So, for Lifang and Cernberg, they organized previous works on learning styles into three traditions or group. These groups are cognitive-centered styles, personality-centered styles, and activity-centered styles. The first one is cognitive-centered styles, in which it assesses the way people process information. This talks about how people would absorb information based on their preferred learning style. Next is personality-centered styles, in which it would assess more stable personality traits as either being extrovert or introvert. This talks about the assessment of those people about how they would tend to choose whether their approach will be based on their thoughts or on what they feel. And finally, activity-centered styles, in which it assesses both cognition and personality traits. So, this just combined the both of them, which talks about how their cognition and personality would affect their approach on a given activity. For Lifang and Cernberg, they just grouped the learning styles into a category for it to be organized. And now we will head on to the next reporter. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Gil Emmanuel Mejia, and tonight I'll be discussing the topic of gifted and talented students. Those with subtle learning of disabilities are formally identified as gifted because of their high levels of success or IQ scores. Common examples of children with learning disabilities are those with dyslexia, ADHD, and dyspraxia. These kinds of disabilities can be a hindrance to a child's development. However, not all gifted students have learning disabilities. Also, children with learning disabilities are often very smart. Most of them use their intelligence to compensate for their disabilities. So the next time you see a child with learning disabilities, don't mock them. They may be smarter than you. average achievers whose normal level of achievement hides their learning disabilities. Children in Group 2 often frequently go undiscovered for their giftedness or learning impairments. These subgroups of children are hard to spot, mainly because their giftedness or high intellect can hide their disabilities. Children who belong to this subgroup, usually don't get the help they need because, as said before, they are hard to spot. Teachers need to be attentive to their students to spot students with learning disabilities in hiding so that they can get the help that they need. Children who have an identified learning disability and who are also gifted. Children that are gifted often struggle greatly in school, leading to them being labeled as learning handicap. Children who belong to this subgroup often miss out on their talents, as people usually put their attention to them being handicapped rather than helping them and finding out their hidden talents. Moving on, the next subtopic is elements of a program for a student who is gifted and talented. Gifted students with learning disabilities have special programs to help them. Such programs vary per school, but some common elements characterize an individualized program appropriate for a student who is gifted and talented. Number 1. It is different in pace, scope, and complexity. Obviously, their pacing, scope, and complexity are different compared to those children without learning disabilities. Well, if you apply the usual norms of teaching, they are going to have a hard time catching up or understanding even. Number 2. It provides opportunities for students to interact socially and academically with their intellectual peers. In other words, it allows gifted students, to interact with other gifted students. Number 3. It incorporates adaptations. Adaptations in the sense of learning environment. The learning environment for gifted students is drastically different compared to those without learning disabilities. Number 4. It goes beyond the walls of a school and into a larger community. These programs not only help those gifted students but also allows people without learning disabilities to have awareness regarding children with learning disabilities. Programs for gifted students are unique compared to students.
Students from indigenous backgrounds. Our cultural backgrounds tell something about us, and our differences may lead to some drawbacks, like in the case of indigenous students. Students in this group have different cultural norms, and communicating with them might lead to cultural and communication barriers. We are aware that communication can be verbal or non-verbal, and their non-verbals like facial expressions, eye contact, tone of our voice, touch, gestures, and privacy may have different interpretation in their culture. Let us say that we have a student who belongs to this group. If they are acting weird or strange, we must not judge them immediately and consider their origins instead. Learning how to learn is the most important element of indigenous teaching and learning. An old answer by Weinstein, 2001, defines learning how to learn as understanding, application, and retention of new knowledge and skills in different situations. For example, an indigenous student may share his or her knowledge with his or her parents and friends after learning the causes of diarrhea and how to avoid such illness. In this case, they will discover the cause and effects, as well as the step-by-step on proper washing of hands, sanitation, and among others. The mentioned example cultivates listening, observing, experiencing the five senses, developing natural understanding, and respecting old and effective learning. Indigenous teaching focuses on learning with the heart and brain. Facilitators should subscribe with who the students are versus who they are in the teacher's eyes. This method is also considered organic development, a metaphor of planting seeds until it bears fruit. I have watched a 2016 documentary of Kaur David of Eyewitness under GMA Network titled Teacher Annie. One of the kindergarten students was already 20 years old. She shared that her father discouraged her to enroll because the teacher was foreign to them. In vernacular or Bisaya, dayo ang teacher. That is why the relationship between the teacher and the students in this group determines the results of the process. If we are going to analyze the metaphor, Teacher Annie planted the seed, her time and effort to the students until it grows, until it became fruitful. In terms of assessments like examinations, teachers can use indigenous practices like creative dreaming, art, ritual, and ceremony so that they will externalize their thoughts. Most importantly, teachers who will handle such students should acquire humility over pride, arrogance, and egocentric characteristics. As future educators, let us start educating ourselves to possess the above-mentioned positive attributes to handle well the students from different backgrounds.
To introduce the fair and safe learning environment, let's discuss about what is inclusive education. So, inclusive education is attempting to address and responding to the diverse needs of all learners by continuing to increase engagement in learning, cultures, and communities, and diminishing exclusion from and within education. It means that all students attend and are welcomed by their neighborhood schools in age-appropriate, regular classes, and are supported to learn, contribute, and participate in all aspects of the life of the school. It provides a foundation for all students to progress in all aspects of their lives. It consists of practical academic experience that can occur in a variety of settings and in a variety of methods, and creates opportunity to meet the needs of a diversified group of students. Overall, inclusive education is the most effective way to give all a fair chance to go to school, learn, and develop the skills they need to thrive. So we have two practices that effectively support an inclusive education. One is the response to intervention, or the RTI, a framework to enhance student learning through remediation, a multi-tiered approach aimed at identifying and supporting struggling students. RTI is generally separated into three instructional tiers. In Tier 1, or the universal interventions, it is available to all students in a classroom or school, can consist of whole group or individual strategies or supports. This means that all learners receive high-quality instruction in the general education classroom. Example of this is a typical classroom lesson delivered by a teacher. Teachers should periodically screen their students, consider alternative approaches to measure progress. Next is the Tier 2 or the individualized interventions. Subset of students receive interventions targeting specific needs. Tier 2 takes place for students that have not been able to advance out of Tier 1. The students identified as in need of intervention are given the opportunity to learn in a smaller group setting. Teachers will reinforce basic concepts. Remember, it aims to supplement but not to replace primary instruction. Students should be working on the same material that they're working on in their general education classes. Lastly, the Tier 3 or the intensive interventions. Students who are non-responders to Tiers 1 and 2 are referred to the RTI team for more intensive interventions. This represents the most intensive and most individualized instructions. It is a serious intervention that takes place for students that continue to struggle in both Tier 1 and 2 of RTI. If a student is not showing adequate progress in Tier 3 instruction, they can be evaluated and considered for special education services. And that's all for the inclusive education and RTI. Thank you.
Once again, good evening everyone. I am Miss Gisela Supong, and tonight I am going to discuss the learning participation together with the learner's voice. I know that we are all exposed to this word and some of us are doing and participating in it. However, some are still observing the process to be able to participate in learning. So what is learning participation? Learners' participation plays a vital role in teaching and learning process. It is a collaboration of students and teachers to achieve the desired learning outcome. If you try to imagine a class with no participation or exchange of ideas at all, the class will be so dull and lifeless. As what we observe every meeting, teachers always ask questions and perspective of each student to have an interactive discussion. The question is, how could we participate in learning? As we all know from our previous reporters, that each and every one of us has their own learning styles and preferences. So it is possible that we can learn and express our thoughts and ideas in our own ways and be understood. As Howard Gardner from his theory of multiple intelligence says, that we can acquire maybe one or more from those learning and apply it inside or outside of the class. Learner participation entails knowledge exchange, active cooperation, and other type of communication and expression in which students and teachers exchange and discourse so that the perspective are heard and acknowledged. To answer the question, how could learning participation occur? Simply by being responsible for our own learning. As a learner, we must involve ourselves and experience it firsthand. Although our current situation affects the flow of communication, since every meeting our time are limited, well, we can learn in many ways. First, from our experiences and from the SIM. The self-instructional materials was already provided with its supplementary information, and we can also use multi-sources to cater different information for a better understanding. As a learner, we can generate the learning and apply it in different contexts, and the role of teacher is only to facilitate the knowledge, and they don't serve as the fountain of knowledge. They don't need to spoon feed us everything, and as a learner, let us do our part. Next, we have the learner's voice and participation. It has two implications. First, having lesson 2. Being heard and have the opportunity to express your thought is a great help for students. In this way, not only the confidence will be built, but also they can face their fear. For example, you represent your group on oral recitation. You did not deliver your message properly, and some were confused, labi nag-bright at the mga classmates. And as the role of instructor is to guide and utilize the learning, if there are misconceptions, then he or she will take an action to it and make it right so that it will be understood by everybody, as well as give some words of encouragement to motivate students to try again and not be afraid to learn new. In this way, teachers can give feedback on the aspects they really excel on, then praise them, while referring them on the learning preferences that really works on them. As you assess, teachers must be transparent and give words without sugarcoating. It helps on how will they improve themselves more and on what area they need to work more. In a classroom or in this online setting, there are two types of students, the active and the passive learners. Active learners are the students that speak out and involve themselves in a discussion, while the passive are the opposite. Besides, let's remember that not because students are passive, they are not learning. It can be their way of learning, maybe they are into written rather than oral learners. And in this, we can anchor the second implication of learner's voice, the feeling of invested learning. As they listen, every student has the right to express their opinion, thoughts, and ideas that correlates to their prior knowledge and the present one in the way they are confident to. And in conclusion, the classroom participation and the learner's voice is not only beneficial on students, but to the teachers as well. If students give their perspective upon the situation and gives feedback to the teacher, the learning can be vice versa. It indicates that there is a balance of power that allows teachers and students to be partnered with the whole educational experience. That ends with my report. I am Gisela Supong. Thank you for listening.
So good day everyone. I am Nicholas Perpin and I'm here to discuss with you the learner voice and participation. Based on Lewis and Parker 2004, creating a learner center that values respect and diversity involves promoting participation and gaining learners' input about their learning process and school life as a whole. Every learner has a right to express his or her views, needs, and entitlement to influence the service. It's said that students should have respect, values, and also the diversity in order to improve their participation in learning and also to gain knowledge. Every learner has the right to express his or her needs and entitlement to influence the service. So here are the 4 underpinning values of learners based on Robinson and Taylor 2007. The conception of communication as dialogue, the requirement for participation in democratic inclusivity, the recognition that power relations are unequal and problematic, the possibility of change and transformation. Moving on with capacitating learners' ability. If a teachers to attend the learning challenges of the one of the students successfully, it is insufficient just to focus on the teaching processes alone. Teacher also need to have a broader understanding on how learning occurs and conjectures that influence the educational attainment of students. To empower learners and enhance learning outcomes, teachers need to monitor their learning and respond to them accordingly. He included that to empower students when it comes to enhancing the learning outcomes, teachers should monitor their students and further to respond them accordingly, and also to help them to improve their ideas. Based on that, he noted that learners should have the public world that the teacher sees them manages, structured by learning activities that the teacher designs. The semi-private world of ongoing students' relationships where students establish and maintain their social roles and status. The private world of the child mind where children's knowledge and beliefs change and grow.
Hello, I am Jacob Villahera, and I will be discussing all about the misbehavior management. So, before we start, what is misbehavior? Student misbehaviors such as disruptive talking, chronic avoidance of work, clowning, interfering with teaching activities, harassing classmates, verbal insults, rudeness to teacher, and deviance and hostility, ranging from infrequent to frequent, mild to severe, is a thorny issue in everyday classroom. So, how do we deal with this misbehavior? Here are the 4 strategies to enforce class engagement. The first one is having everyone respond to the teacher's queries. Instead of focusing on one correct answer from a student, try asking everyone their input on that specific topic that you are discussing. Next are seating arrangements. Changing rows periodically as necessary may help to break the monotonous atmosphere in the classroom by stimulating engagement and interaction between classmates. Third, instructions and guidelines may only be preceded after prompting the pupil's attention. When presenting the do's and don'ts of your classroom rules, make sure your voice is calm yet authoritative. Also, give time for your students to comply and absorb the information you just gave them. Lastly, deliver the instructions in a precise, specific, direct, and well-paced manner. This will avoid question and confusion among students regarding the task. Follow praises when necessary upon compliance to boost their motivation. So, those are the strategies to enforce class engagement. And that is everything about my report. Thank you so much for listening. And now, moving on to the next reporter.
So, good evening once again. This is Rarely Mahilong Pondoyo, and for tonight, I will be going to continue the lesson 5.5, Misbehavioral Management, in particular with effective specific classroom-wide interventions. So, effective specific classroom-wide interventions include 6 components, which are the teacher performance feedback, class-wide incentives, noise management, managing transitions, enhancing engagement, and also relationship building. To begin with, let's start with teacher performance feedback. So when we say teacher performance feedback, it's about the evaluation of the teachers at the end of the semester or at the end of the discussion. Just like what we did on our previous semester to all our professors. So when we say teacher performance feedback, it's about it helps the professor or the learning facilitator to identify what are those key factors affecting why is it some students didn't catch up the lesson easily, or it may vary through the subject itself or the professor itself. So teacher performance feedback enables to reflect the teachers, thereby changing their ways to meet the students' need. So as a future educator, it is important for you to be able to adjust on how are you going to take the discussion effectively happen for them or to achieve effective teaching learning process. Next, we have class-wide incentives. Interventions and incentives may work better when given as a whole class rather than on specific learners only. This will reduce class competition and promotion the cooperation of the learners. It is important to avoid discrimination considering the feelings of all students as part of a group. So, class-wide incentives achieve fair and smooth discussion. It is important since all the students have the right to learn freely and fairly. So, this enables the classroom management or to achieve effective teaching learning process under the engagement of the learning facilitator and the students itself. Next, we have noise management. Reduction of noise levels can direct students' focus to the lesson and the classes in adjacent room. So, noise management is important not just in classroom setup but also in new learning modalities, since we cannot deny the fact that there are many noises in our environment or from the engines or from our seatmates in a classroom setup. That's the reason why noise management is important. So, noise distracts the students from learning. And as a student, in new learning modalities, it is your obligation to find private place for you to be able to heard what the teacher is trying to convey and for you to be able to catch up the lesson easily. And as a learning facilitator, you are obliged also to find a private place for you to be able to deliver your discussion effectively happen, or considering the noise of the environment we're in, it distracts the students from focusing on what you are trying to say. Managing transition. So, according to Fudge 2008, it claimed the use of a color code system with matching signals to show applicable rules at the given time could serve as a guide. So, when we say managing transition, it's about establishing clear, specific rules as a group rather than individually may better assist in regulating behavior and changes. Now, let's proceed to enhancing engagement. So, make variations on how the teachers solicit an answer from the students to encourage full participation. So, when we say enhancing engagement, it's about the students and the learning facilitators' engagement. So, as a student, to achieve effective learning experience, you have to listen attentively to the discussant or the learning facilitator for you to be able to understand what are the teachers trying to convey or the discussion itself. And as a learning facilitator, you have to give a activities on after the discussion for you to be able to evaluate if the students have learned something from the discussion. So by this, we can able to create effective teaching learning process to happen. Lastly, we have relationship building. So according to Patterson 2009, explained that when a teacher is involved in learners' small talk outside of the class may prevent them from misbehaving in a class, especially those attention seekers. So relationship building focuses on the engagement of the student and the learning facilitator itself. So, it is about the interaction of the students and the teacher inside the premises of the school and outside the premises of the school. Since some professors treat the students outside on the premises of the school as best friends, as buddy. So, by that, they can able to create interaction, to create or to build strong relationship that will bring on the classroom setup. So, by that moment, the student and the teacher already have a interaction. So, the students may participate on online or in classroom discussion since they are open to each other. So, by that, they can create effective teaching learning process or learning experiences effectively happen. Therefore, effective specific classroom-wide intervention is important to achieve effective teaching learning process to happen. So by this, we can able to create interaction by the students, we can able to achieve smooth discussion, we can able to build relationship to our facilitators, as well as we can able to enhance our skills, broaden our knowledge, and as a future educator, to have background on how are we going to facilitate the learning experience of the students for them to be able to feel appreciated and loved. So, effective specific classroom-wide intervention focuses on the teacher and the students' interaction, and it's very important as a future educator for you to be able to adjust and to new learning modalities and to meet the students' need. And I think that's the end of
Good evening everyone, my name is Mas Stephanie Lavares and I will be discussing about the behavioral problem solving. So according to Coloroso 1994, he suggested a 6-step process for behavioral problem solving. The goal is to utilize this process with students until they learn how to implement the process on their own. So the 6 steps are the following. So we have the define the problem, evaluate the possible solutions against a set of criteria, select an option, plan the implementation, and review the problem. So first is define the problem. Of course, in a problem solving, we need to define and analyze each problem so that we could be able to come up into a another step of making it. So the next is to evaluate the possible solutions against a set of criteria. Of course, in a problem solving, we of course first we need to analyze, and then after analyzing those, we come up into a lot of possible happenings and some sort of resolutions. And then the next part is we need to select an option. Of course, in having some sort of resolution, we need to have an option to make. Like, for example, we need to have this plan A, and then we need to have this plan B, and so on and so forth. So the next is plan the implementation. Of course, when you have when you come up into a resolution, you need to plan the implementation so that we could be able to make the resolution an act of solving it. Like, we are about to do actions to solve specific problem solving. And then the 5th one, or the last one, is review the problem. So we need to review the problem in order for us to make our behavioral problem solving effectively. And of course, in learning how to make those kind of behavior, is we need to analyze, of course, evaluate things, we need to make some sort of resolutions, and of course, in making some sort of resolution, we need to make it become effectively. We need to do action for it so that we could be able to solve those. And of course, at the end of it, we need to realize things so that we could be able to make some sort of improvements. And also we need to realize our learnings so that we could be able to apply it and gain a lot of ideas from it so that we can be able to use in the future. So that's how simple behavioral problem solving process is. So if you will be able to follow this 6-step of process for behavioral problem solving, it's easy for you to define and to resolve a specific problem solving. And this is according to Coloroso 1994. So that's it for my report, and thank you so much for listening.